So I said I would go live today, and it is March the 3rd, a little bit after 12. I had a little bit of technical difficulties, but I wanted to make sure I went live because I've been receiving a lot of questions regarding illustration, about children's books, about what I do, and simply just to encourage each and every person who's really interested in getting into this field. Or if you're just an artist and you find yourself wondering, like, what other things do people do? So, hello, I am Shalene. My name is Shalene Wright. I'm a children's book illustrator, but primarily I'm simply just an illustrator. And what I do essentially, the most, the biggest part of my job is to illustrate children's books. A lot of my work right now, a lot of the contracts that I have are working on children's books, and I really enjoy it. So before I get any further, I really want to pull up the questions that I've been receiving. I left a page. One moment while I adjust my camera. So I left a post on the community tab where you can leave questions, and because I am streaming from my phone right now, it's gonna be a little shakier than I wanted, but if you just give me a moment to adjust, that would be great. Okay, that's better. So I'm just pulling it up on my screen now. So let's see. Okay, so the first question from the post that I made on my community tab is from Luna Bella Rosa. And she says, "Thank you so much for sharing your illustration journey. First question is, how did you push past doubt and uncertainty to pursue your illustrator dreams?" So to be honest, I feel like my entire life I've been pushing through to get to where I am today. And even now, I still feel like I'm really pushing to where I want to be. Because even though this is a space where I've seen myself several years ago, being here, I developed even more dreams that I wanted to achieve along the way, or I allowed myself to re envision, well, more so, I allowed myself to really identify what it is that I wanted again, because the closer I actually got into doing art as a full-time career, the more I realized, there were other dreams of mine that I wanted to pursue that I pushed down way, 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 way down because I didn't believe that I was able to do them. So finding myself in the illustrator space now and doing children's books for several years, I realized there's actually a lot more that I wanted to do. So, how did I push past that doubt? I would say definitely sticking to what you do, sticking to what you're doing that works, and creating consistency. So, in terms of creating consistency, if you are working on your portfolio and you're saying that you want to get into doing children's books or even just simply becoming an illustrator, really give yourself a regimen, a routine, and a guide that's going to at least get you some results. Even if it's not specifically a job or a title, continue to have those habits that get you there. And I feel like that's what helps you push past the doubt, because being in your head doesn't allow you any time or space to really get things done, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So there's the moments where you feel everything and you feel really exhausted and you feel tired and you feel like, am I really going to get to where I want to be? But you have to always pair that with an action. And because the emotional aspect of everything happening is very real, and I'm not gonna act like it's not like a real thing. You're gonna feel doubtful. You're gonna feel like, how do I even get there? I'm not ready. I do want to do this, but I don't want to do this now. Even when the opportunity comes, you might feel like, I'm not there yet. I just need a little bit more experience. I need a little bit more time. You're always going to want to feel like you need something else. I still feel like that, and it's been 7 years. And I'm like, I still need to just work on my color. I still need to work on my design. I still need to work on my composition. There's always going to be that conversation, but you always need to pair that with action. And that's how you get through the doubt. That's how you get through the fear, the anxiety, because once you start working, you're allowing yourself the time to process things. And if you're anyone like me, when I'm drawing, that's when I actually start to process my life and reflect on, I actually can do this, or I'm totally like nervous and working through the nerves. And I feel like if you find yourself in a state of inaction, do something. Just do something, because the inactivity is actually just not conducive. It's not helpful to you long term in terms of what you want. It's one thing to feel it and to have those emotions, and it's another thing to have them and still get work done. So that's how I would say I pushed past the doubt and the uncertainty. So the next question by Luna Bella Rosa is, how do you know when your art is ready for the world or viewers? I would say from as early as you're comfortable with, start sharing your art with people and start giving people the experience of seeing your work and start getting feedback from others. I feel like the people around us, sometimes family, sometimes friends are a really good soundboard to see like how people react to our art. But as soon as you're able, start sharing your content, your artwork, your sketches, your ideas with the people in your outside your circle to see how people react to it. And I know this is a really tough one because with social media and the algorithm, sometimes people really do just look at your art and they don't like it and they don't leave a comment. But to be honest, I feel like we might have to go out of our comfort zone to get the responses we need. And that might mean not using social media. You might actually have to talk to friends of friends, bring your work, start carrying your sketchbooks with you if you're not already doing that, and really start building a conversation around your art and stop allow people to just make comments and see what's the first thing they say and don't take it personal. I feel like that's the biggest part is you don't want to take whatever people say personal because they might not actually be interested in what you're trying to achieve through your art. Like I'm a children's book illustrator and someone might look at my artwork and be like, your work is so childish, but I'd be like, no duh. I'm a children's book illustrator. So you have to know who you're making your art for and realize like some people they'll be like, yeah, your work is so childish, and you always have like these big eyes on your characters, but I'm like, yes, thank you for getting that. Like I really wanted that. I wanted that feedback. It's not an insult. They might, even if people say it as an insult, it's to you, you have to realize like you're making your art for a purpose, and it's to a child that is like a dream come true. And seeing that not everyone's going to have the reaction that you want, but you just want to know what are people's first instinct when they think of your art, when they feel it, when they see it, because it's not always going to be positive, but it might actually be pointing you in the direction that you think that you might want for yourself. So just give me 1 second. I'm using my phone, but I'm also using my computer. I can't tell if there's comments because I've never done a live before, but I'm just gonna pull up the live on my screen so I can see if there's any other messages coming through that I'm not seeing. So if you just give me 1 second, I'm just gonna be super quick. And 1 second, internet's kind of slow. So yeah, definitely try to get outside your circle and ask people what they're, you don't even have to ask them, just say, hey, wait, what do you think of this? Just show it to them, see what happens. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And then this is the next level to that comment that I would actually say is that people will also tell you when you're ready. Because when people start telling you, hey, can you illustrate this for me? Can you draw this for me? I'll get to your question in a second. Can you illustrate this for me? Can you draw this for me? Can you do my book for me? Can you do my book cover? When people start telling you and telling you where they see your artwork, I would also say that's a really good sign that your work is at a level that people want to be represented by your art. And that's a really big statement. And don't take it lightly. I know it can be really like scary to jump into that. But as a starter, it is a sign that you're ready. And you don't always need the validation from outside. And one thing that I did was I found some of the illustrators that I really respected and I studied their art. And then I said to myself, does my art fit in with where they are. And it doesn't have to be perfectly, and it doesn't have to be like exceptional. It just has to be, is this the ballpark of where I'm aiming for? So I looked for different kinds of artists because, you know, there are realistically trained artists that focus in realism, and then there's surrealism, then there's abstract, and then there's so many different forms of art, and they all are respected, and they're all these artists get paid. So the reality is, you don't have to be a artist that focuses on realism, and you don't have to be in abstract or surrealism or fantasy art. There's a market for everybody. So really, you have to look at all of them and realize, okay, it's not about me drawing as realistic and as perfectly as possible. It's literally simply just, can I communicate this idea, and can I get it across, and can people understand it? So when that's how you know essentially if you're ready. Can you communicate an idea, and can people understand it? And is it finished enough so that you can see that, so that you can I see your work published? Is it that finished enough? A finished quality. That's what I would say. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be super touched up. It just has to have a finished quality where people look at it and it's like, wow, this is a complete work and not a work in progress. So I would say that. So I just got 2 questions coming through. I do not know how to check this, guys. I'm so sorry. So how so do I recommend drawing daily? I do, if that's how you feel. I actually suggest drawing as frequently as you can. And if it's daily, I'd say that's great. But make sure when you're drawing, it's intentional. You don't want to just be drawing anything. You want to focus your time and really give it a designated focus. You want to say, okay, today I'm focusing on drawing the face. And now that I'm drawing the face, I'm going to focus on the features and making sure I know how to draw noses correctly. Make sure you know how to draw eyes correctly, lips, within the style that you have. And I would generally say that's what I would do. So even if you're drawing daily, you want to make sure it's intentional drawing and not just random drawing. Because random drawing is great, but you're going to improve your art if you're actually focusing on improving in a specific area, one area at a time, instead of doing it randomly. Because our mind is actually building that learning base of knowledge to grow from when we actually take that time to dedicate to figure, oh, so this is how eyes really look. Because our minds, they actually believe the world looks a certain way, but when you start studying specific features and studying the world, you actually retrain your mind to see that, you know, eyes aren't simply just one line and a circle. Like, there's much more nuance, there's much more detail that comes to it. And so you actually have to teach your brain the differences in what you're seeing in art, because our mind actually works off of symbols. So a lot of us, if we remember, we'll draw the sun with the circle and the lines around it, because that's how we identify the symbol of the sun. But that when we look at well, we don't look at the sun. When we see the sun in the sky, we know it's a ball of light, but we don't literally represent a ball of light as a ball, because the light is actually emanating from this space. So what our brains do, we break it down into a symbol, and it's a circle essentially. But when you're actually painting the sun, or the sun in the sky, you're not simply just drawing a circle, you're also drawing or coloring the different hues of color that infer that it's the sun that you're looking at. So I got another question from Nod. How did you first get into children's book illustration, and how did you get your first client? So I actually have a video on this on my channel, and you can refer to that. Because it's a long answer, I can answer at the end if you don't mind waiting, because it's a really long one. I just want to get through the other questions I had under my community tab. So I'm just going to get through those, and then maybe I can get back to your question. And because it's a long answer. So let me see if I can find your other question before I move on. So I do more acrylic art, but interested in children's book illustration, even though I've gone into that. I see. Yeah. I feel like there is a space for doing acrylic art in children's book illustration. I do know there was an artist. His name was Will Terry, I believe. And I was studying and learning from him before. Hey, ZP. I was studying from him before, and I mean, online in his videos, and he actually drew his pieces on hand, and then you can scan them in and then get them sent to your agency or to the publisher, and they'll still work with your art if it is traditional media. It's just a matter of, can you get the work delivered in a reasonable amount of time in a high quality piece of work, and then make the changes as you need. So I'm going to go back to our questions on the community tab. So I'd like to know, from Pretty Kitty Paintings, I'd like to know what timelines you've been given to work on typical 32-page to full color children's books, as well as what you do to balance those finish lines. That's a great question. So I feel like a lot of people surprise. They will give you, for a typical 32-page, I would say around 5 to 6 months. And it may seem like a lot of time, but when you're actually working on it, it goes by very, very quickly. So I would say 5 to 6 months is the regular ballpark. I can be given a job in the middle of May, and my term of the contract says, we want to have the finals by the end of November or October. But the reality is, when you're actually working on the book itself, life still happens. So that timeline that you originally agreed to gets either accelerated, it can move up because you're moving faster than they anticipated, or it can go much slower because people are getting sick, and there are different life circumstances that cause each and every person in the team, because it's you as an illustrator, and then there's a team of people that you do not even see. So there's your art director, and then there's people on the like the editors, then there's the authors that you're also working with. There's a whole chain, so it's really a pipeline. So even if you're being given the time frame, okay, we have 6 months to get this done, life still happens, and it's good to go in with the expectation that sometimes you do need an extra week to get your work in for your deadlines, and sometimes you move a little faster, but that doesn't mean you're going to finish any sooner or any later. You just have to feel it out day by day, week by week. So 5 to 6 months. And what do I do to balance those finish lines and the deadlines? So when you're working on one book, I find that it's a lot more easy to juggle the time frame, because you have your entire life that you're living, you have family, you have friends, and your leisure time. But then you also have to incorporate you simply just have to incorporate work in there. So if it takes you you give yourself 8 hours every day, like a regular job, like any other job, give yourself 8 hours a day where you're going to be working on the sketches, or if you're in this phase where you're starting to color or revisions, you're just dedicating that time to it. But I would say the balance really starts to come in when you have multiple projects and you're balancing multiple deadlines. So, for example, we're in March. I could have a deadline next week, Monday, for a book about flowers, and I could have another deadline the same next week, Friday, about a book where I'm doing something about cars. And then the following week, I could have a book cover or a simple editorial illustration. It doesn't like it They all vary, and they're all different people, different agencies, different publishers, different people that you're working with. That I feel like where the balance comes in there is when you have to consider, before you even take the job, do you realistically have time in your schedule to do each and every task that they're asking you for? Because I learned this the hard way. I learned this the hard way. I feel like I'm not the fastest painter or illustrator, and I'm definitely not the slowest, but I know my strengths. But you have to realize that you're working with people and not just robots. So someone might say, I want you to draw this specific scene. I want the sun over here. I want 3 children over there. They're all smiling, a playground in the back. I want lots of grass. And you might interpret that, you might take that and be like, great, I know exactly what I'm gonna do. And then you go on to start drawing it, you send the sketch, but it's not what they saw in their mind. So now you have to wait to get that feedback. So that could be 1 week or 2 weeks. Then when you receive that feedback, you have to look at your calendar again and say, okay, I originally thought that the first time I submitted this work, I would be able to move on to the next stage. But it turns out I got it wrong, or there are elements of what I've done that is wrong. So now the deadline that you thought you saw in your mind gets pushed back a little further, and it gets pushed closer to a different project you are working on. So I find like the stress now has to come in where you have to look at each and every project that you're working on and really see, okay, you have to give yourself time allowance for being able to finish each and every project the way and a realistic time frame that is healthy for you. You don't want to take on projects where you feel like it's going to stress you out. So you have to see, how much time do I realistically have? Is this work that they're asking me to do based on the brief that they give you? And the brief is going to give you an overall idea of the project. So this book is going to be about grief. This book is going to be about joy. You have to think, or more specifically, it's about automobiles. Do you even have experience drawing automobiles? That's a big question, because if you don't, you're going to find yourself having to study, having to draw how to draw automobiles in your time. And that's going to take away drawing time. A lot of these things where these projects you're taking on, they should at least be in your frame of reference, and people that are hiring you should have already looked at your portfolio, so they know where your strengths are, and they're hiring you for your strengths and not necessarily your weaknesses. So you also have to be realistic for yourself. So give you the best way to balance the deadlines is to know before you even take on a project, is this something I can realistically commit to be, because of time, because of my skill sets, and also because of the other projects you have and are balancing. Are they easy projects that you're balancing, or are they really challenging projects? So the balance is having your work fit your lifestyle and not fitting your lifestyle around your work, because you will become a slave to work if you do it the wrong way. You have to imagine, what do you want your life to be like, and how do you want your work to fit inside that? Otherwise, you'll feel really stressed, and really, you won't be excited to draw anymore. So I received a question from ZP. What do you think is the easiest drawing style for beginners? I would say the easiest drawing style to start with is definitely the one you feel comes most naturally to you. And if you're inspired by anime, or more so cartoons, or any form of like animated media, stick to what you're interested in and learn how to do that. Because if you start branching off into things you're not interested in too early, you'll just lose your interest to draw. So my biggest suggestion is to start with a style that you think is fun, and find a way to perfect it or master that style. So I saw another question. What is a good start off for intentional drawing? So this is a connection to my earlier comment to your question, Quantavious. So a good start off for intentional drawing is looking at where your strengths are in your art, and looking at where your weaknesses are, and decide, do you want to focus on the hard stuff that you don't really know how to do, or do you want to focus on the stuff you really love? And if, for example, for me, I really struggle with drawing backgrounds, and that's a fact. So intentional drawing, what that would look like for me is sitting down, grabbing visuals from Pinterest, and also grabbing examples from other professional illustrators or artists that I like, who are really good at doing background. So like background artists for shows and television shows. So I can grab all of those materials, and then I'm gonna choose an image that I like and take the time to either draw the objects that I'm seeing, either make it about the sketch. I'm gonna teach myself how to do a really good quality sketch and draw that out. If it's color, I'm gonna choose a color, and then I'm going to color it. And if it takes you having to draw it over 7 times, then it's drawing it over as many times as you need, so that you feel confident in being able to say, well, I know how to do this and I logged it in my mind, because there's a part of your brain that knows how to draw a face, for example, because you've drawn it 50,000 times. So you don't really have to think about it anymore. You already know when you turn your pencil a certain way, it's like, oh, this, I turned it too soon. So you already have your intuition is telling you because you trained it. So that's why art is more of a skill and not so much of a talent. It can be a talent, but you really want to weigh in on the skill side of art, because it's training your mind, your hand, and your muscles so that they can see what you're seeing. Because how many times have you guys been in a situation where you're looking at an apple and you say, I'm going to draw this apple, but your hand is not drawing what you're looking at? And that's because your mind doesn't understand yet the qualities that you're seeing, because your eyes, the reality of what your eyes see and what your brain is seeing as an apple, your hand, the muscles in your hand, and what your brain is actually understanding as an apple isn't actually connecting. So you need to teach your brain, like, hey, the apple looks like this, and there's a little bump right there. The curvature goes like this and it goes around. And then teaching your hand how to like shade it or draw the stick. Like the stick isn't straight, it's curved and it's bent, and there's two lines here. You have to train your eyes to see the fine details. And if you aren't doing that, I feel like that's what the intentionality is forcing your mind through routine and practice how to see what you're seeing and how to see what you're not seeing, because I feel like that's where the skill starts to build. So I would definitely say that that's where the intentional drawing comes from. And because I did that for several years, I would say, because I did not realize that whatever I was drawing wasn't actually what was there. And it took me a while that, oh my gosh, like the human body, a woman's body, when you're drawing a body, it doesn't just go straight like that. Like all of our bodies don't look like that. But when I would sit alone without a reference, that's what my mind was telling me. So I had to feed my mind more information that, bodies look different. So now I've trained my mind in a frame of reference where I know what a standard body looks like when I'm not seeing a reference. And I can draw that in 4 different ways confidently until I need a reference for whenever I need it. And references aren't bad. References are amazing. I use them all the time and I don't know where I'd be without them. So I'd highly suggest use a reference, grab an inspiration, and go from there. So I have just a couple more questions here, and then I'm going to get back to the first question that I had from Ned. And so, what is the first thing that you do? From pretty kitty paintings, we have, what is the first thing that you do to get started on your picture book illustration projects after reading the manual a couple times? And definitely, it's just sketching. So sketching is one of the most important parts of the book, because once you're the author and the art director are like, hey, we love this, you don't really go back. You can't go back to the beginning, and you don't really want to either. And there are times where you read the manuscript or the text and you're inspired, so you really want to write down what you're seeing in your mind and the vision, and sketch it out as many times as you can, that where you feel like you got the idea fleshed out. And personally, for me, the sketching phase is the most fun. And right after that, it's when I'm coloring everything. And I like coloring everything in because I know that I'm close to finishing the book. So it's more of a completion excitement more than like a joy to draw. So I would definitely say the first thing that I do to get started on the picture books is to sketch what's coming to my mind after reading the manuscript, and give yourself time to create multiple versions and do them in thumbnails. So do them really small. Don't feel like you need to do like a really big page and fill them all in. If you do them small, you can get through more quickly and explore the ideas you have in your head without feeling you need to do a lot of details and make it really specific. The next one is, what is the thing you look forward to the most when illustrating your picture books? Completing it. Definitely completing it, and honestly getting paid, because the term of children's books is really long. So the idea of going weeks without pay is really hard. So I like the idea of finishing it and knowing I get paid. But apart from thinking about payment, definitely is the sketching phase, because it's the one point where I feel like I have the most creative freedom. and I'm telling the author or the art director, hey, this is what I had in my mind. So I feel like that's the most freeing experience, is being able to share what I've come up with without having to um, receive the critique, I guess. Plus, I don't really enjoy coloring that much. That is definitely something I struggle with. Coloring is one of my hardest things to do. So I have to excite myself and be like, hey, we could do this today. We're actually starting color. I have to psych myself up just to do it. So coloring isn't my favorite. Sketching 100,000%. So, what are some creative ways you've negotiated your contracts from the publisher? So, I wouldn't say they're creative ways, because I've worked with authors one to one, and I have experience where I do have an agent as well. So the good side of having an agent is you don't have to think so much about the nuances of what your contract states. But if there is anything I don't like, I've already let my agent know. But when I'm working with authors one to one, or if a someone reaches out to me and they want to work with me, ways I negotiate my contract, I feel like there's room. The wiggle room comes in when you actually have a larger body of work that you're already working with. So what I mean by that is, if you're just start when I was just starting out, I didn't have that much freedom to say like, hey, I want to keep all my rights to all my work. And not that I couldn't say that. I just felt like it was more important for me to get the job and have that in my utility belt to say like, hey, I work with this company, and kind of keep it there. I feel like there's projects you take that are really great for your reputation, and there are projects you don't take because it's not worth it. And but I feel like, from my perspective and in my advice, I'm the type of artist that will look at the long-term vision. And if I know certain projects are going to give me a payout, or if this is a really important book for my career as a whole, if I want to keep doing this, there are certain books you really do want to just accept that, I may not own the rights to this, and that's something that's important to me. Some artists might not care about that, but I would say to myself, you know what, Shalane, this is a really big deal for my career. Maybe in 5 years, or in 3 years, or next year, I'll start vocalizing, I want to have more ownership over my work. But for now, while I'm still building my career, I'm several years into it, but I still don't see myself where I want to be. So what I would say is, you have to pick and choose the projects where you feel like you can give this freely, because the return comes later. The advantages of the project come much later, rather than the instant gratification of like, hey, I own this, I own my work. Because if you know you're getting a job from a publisher that will establish you as an illustrator like forever, would you feel like it's more important to pass that away, or take the job and feel as no be established? Because being established in this industry is really important, because when you're working with authors one to one, what's great about that is you actually have more creative freedom, and you can, how can I say this, it's actually a much more intimate process, because you're speaking with the author one to one. You can get their ideas in much faster, and you can speak with the author to explain why things are happening. But when you're working through, let's say, a publisher, there's so many other hoops you have to jump through, and that's not bad. It's actually really great, because there's screening and there's a process. You're getting much more eyes on your project, and so things take more time. So the issues of urgency are genuinely seen as like urgent. It's like, this is more important. Let's focus on this. We have 6 weeks, because we have to get the book published by December. And if it's not published by December, then we're a week off and we can't get it into stores. So, you have to assume that weight of responsibility, that, the book's been written or everything's been done. Everyone is just waiting on you. So now, when you have that weight, you have to realize you're working with a team. You're not just thinking I'm working with an author and I'm giving them the files at the end and then you're done. It's not really like that. So you have to really weigh the, when you're negotiating contracts, I would say it's more about what are your red flags or your deal breakers. You have to just know what is it that you want to sacrifice or what is it that you don't want to sacrifice. And then the last question I have here is, what are some things to look out for when you receive a contract from a publisher? To be honest, there is an even better person that talks about this topic than me, and her name is Anusha Saeed, I believe. And she's on YouTube and Instagram and a lot of other places. And she also goes by Foxville Art, and she has a really wonderful YouTube video detailing contracts. So I would definitely suggest her for this one, to watch that video. But things that I personally look for is like ownership of art. And usually it's work for hire, or like they assume the IP at the end. And then I look for when are the different stages when I would get paid. That's the next thing I look for in my contract. They usually discuss, you know, that beforehand, but you want to double check that it's in the contract and that you can identify what are you getting in advance or a payment before you start. Are you getting paid at the end of when you submit your sketches? Are you getting paid when you submit the final work? You know, what does that actually look like? I also look at the terms of termination. Like if there comes a point in time where the author or myself, like I don't want to work it for this person anymore, what does that look like and what will happen to me? So I also look at what are the terms of termination for the contract. I also look at royalties. If this is a book where you're getting royalties on it, or a project where you're receiving royalties, you want to make sure you look at that section and understand it and ask questions. And the last thing I genuinely look at is timeline. So seeing how soon everything is going to get delivered, when it's going to get delivered, how it's going to get delivered. And if that's all outlined there in the contract, then I would feel really comfortable moving forward. And I'm sure there's other things as well, because client to client contracts tend to look different. And every contract isn't the same. Some contracts you'll get because you're working for months, and some contracts you'll get because you're only drawing like one small illustration. So they really do vary. So I would say those things that I mentioned beforehand are some things that I look out for. And is there anything else? So, and making sure everything you discussed verbally or even in the emails are genuinely seen inside of the contract. So I did have a question earlier, just gonna double check for it. Oh, thank you, Contavious. Like, I'm really not, like, in my personal opinion, I am not that great at color. I'm still learning, and I had to buy courses to teach myself to learn. And I'm working on it. I'm a work in progress. But thank you for your feedback. So Nod asked earlier, how did you first get into children's book illustration and how did you get your first client? So I do have a video on this. It's how, I think it's called Jobless to Full Time, how I became a children's book illustrator. But essentially, I left art school early. I attended art school here in Toronto back in 2012, and I was on a 4-year degree to do a fine arts painting degree. So I originally am a lover of painting and traditional art. A lot of people don't know that, but traditional art is like, it's my jam. It's honestly my jam. Like working on canvases, and I have hundreds of sketchbooks. So I have to take you guys through it one day. But I was working on my degree, and after my second year, I dropped out. So I dropped out after taking a class, and it was called, I'm glad to, thank you. Uh, what was the course called? It was called Art Media Today. And I was taking this course, and it was pretty much saying that it was teaching me that now that we're in this modern era, artists don't have to get higher education or post-secondary education to become an artist, because now it's accessible to everybody. And then I sat there in my seat at the end of the semester after submitting my work, and I was like, then what am I doing here? I genuinely had that question. And you know what? If me thinking that way, I was more concerned about, so what does my prospects of a career look like genuinely if I finish my degree. Like, so you're telling me if I finish my fine art painting degree, that doesn't mean that I'll actually be an artist, like a working artist. So that freaked me out 100%. So I realized I have to figure this out on my own. Like the school's not going to teach me this. So I just had to accept that. Um, I looked at my course curriculum and my prospect for the next 2 years of what I was going to learn, and I didn't feel confident in the school. So I dropped out. I genuinely dropped out. I took a year off school and I freaked out like, what am I doing with my life? So I returned actually back to school, but I didn't do art. I actually went to a different university and I studied linguistics. So I have a genuine love and passion for language learning, which I've taken a little break from. So I was learning Korean since I was in high school. I've been teaching myself since then, essentially. And my new goal was to become an ESL teacher. And I've always wanted to do that. What I planned on doing was to finish my art degree and then get a little bit of schooling and then teach in South Korea. But then I realized, art's not working out for me anymore. And this was in 2014. Art's not working out, so I have to figure out my own way in life. So I went to study linguistics. I completed a degree in linguistics, and then I did a another program in teaching ESL. So now ESL is English as a second language in Canada because I reside in Canada right now. But it also gave me a TESOL, which is a certification to teach English to people of other languages as well. So it serves as a really great certificate for teaching abroad and overseas. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go to Korea and start a new life, essentially start my career there. And after being in Korea for a year, I realized, you know what? I love art too much. I love art too much because my entire term of being in, when I was studying linguistics, you wouldn't believe it, but I was actually drawing the entire time. I was drawing, creating art, and I actually got my first client while I was a linguistic student. So I realized that I was fighting something that I was fighting like an insecurity in myself that I wouldn't make it. And because of that, I really hesitated to trust that the skills that I had were enough. And honestly, that God was showing me that, this is where I'm meant to be. I'm meant to be an artist and I'm meant to just do what I love. And I shouldn't be afraid that things won't work out. Because genuinely, I'm glad I can host it too. Because genuinely, like, the uncertainty I felt when I was when I was a teacher, is the exact same. And what the difference is, I feel like as an artist, I have a contentment that, I'm going to work through this. But the turmoil I was experiencing as a teacher was something that I felt like I'm there's no way that I can resolve this inner turmoil because I know that this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. So I was more pushing through each day because I'm like, I just need my contract to end because I was on a year-long contract when I was in South Korea, and it was amazing. It was actually the most beautiful experience I've had. But every day getting up out of that bed was like warfare. It was extreme warfare. I cried myself to sleep some night because I'm like, what did I do? Like, I have an amazing job, but I don't feel good. Like, I feel like I'm forcing myself to be something I'm not. And I felt like the school was huge, but that school felt like a prison, and not even like that it was bad. I felt it was trapping me, and I was like, I have to find a way to get out of this. And so I said to myself, when I finish this contract, I'm going to go back to Canada and I'm not getting another job that's not art related. Or I am actively, this is the two things I said, or I'm actively going to work towards figuring out how to work inside of art. So I said, I'll do anything. I'll have any part-time job. I'll do any full-time job. As long as I'm doing art on the side, I will be happy. And I was super content with that. So all along this time, I was actually working with authors since 2015, I believe. And essentially just since then I was just working with authors one to one because I was sharing my artwork online and getting myself into circles. For example, like Facebook was a really is still a really great place to find jobs for if you want to work with authors, because a lot of them are on there inside the Facebook groups. And why I feel like they're a warm audience to share your work with is because they're not 20-year-olds. And I really mean that. So as talent and as an artist, you can be young and work on books, but if you genuinely want to work with a demographic of people that will be able to afford your rate, you do want to start with people who have careers and not just like dreams. So, and what I mean by that is you have to get paid. You have to get paid. And I started out, even me, where I started in my rate was low, but it was enough to cover the books for school. And that's at least over $1,000. So you can imagine that I said, this has to at least pay for my school books. And I go into more detail, I believe, in the video, I think. But essentially, you have to at least, whatever you're charging people should cover the cost of your needs. So when I was on Facebook at the time, I'm not sure if people still use Facebook the way they did in the past because I'm not really on there as much, but I still believe that Facebook groups, they're always going to be a place where people congregate, where they all have a common interest and they all want to get something done. I would highly suggest really looking into yourself and finding out where does your art fit, and who does my art speak to? Because for me, as you guys know, I'm black, and a lot of my characters that I draw are black, and it's intentional, to be honest, because one, representation is really important to me, and two, it's I'm just representing the world through my eyes. So that's why I feel like it's important. But my work speaks to uh, a lot of Christian people because I'm Christian. So I feel like you have to find the intersections where your art actually meets the demand that's out there. And I feel like in a post-pandemic time, there's actually a lot more people who are getting into writing. A lot more children's books are coming out, and I feel like there's going to be an even greater demand for illustrators because people really do want to have more representation, more stories, and have new fresh blood, fresh stories out there that haven't been told before. And we can't just depend on the books of old, I would say, to tell the right stories, because our time is changing. And I really believe that illustrator authors, this is like the best time for it, because I feel like there aren't a lot of young authors, or I would say new authors, that are getting the light of day that I feel like publishers are looking for. So what I would say in terms of getting your first, as an illustrator, getting your first client, is really to consider who are the groups of people that I want to speak to, that have a voice and have a message to share that I could be the voice for. So, or the visual for, because the stories exist. People just need a vehicle to express them through. And I feel like that's what my job is as an illustrator, is to be the visual. So I'm just telling the story that's already been told, and I'm giving people a narrative a visual to follow, because the narrative is already there. So it's a partnership, and I feel like that's the best thing about being an illustrator, is no one person is above the other, because you need each other. An author needs the illustrator, and an illustrator needs the author. And they both have really great ideas, but the illustrator is taking the vision of the author and giving it wings so that other people can see it rise above, like the level that it was at. So definitely, I would say, going into children's book illustration isn't impossible. I would say it's more of a journey, and it's not something you want to rush into either, because it's not easy to rush into it. because a lot of the clientele and just the nature of the work, it takes weeks, if not months, to get things done. So it's, if you have time and you're willing to put in the time, definitely consider this, and consider this aspect of children's book illustration. So the sooner you start, the better, but the sooner you come to the acceptance that this is a long-term game. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's not like that at all. It's definitely, where do I see myself in 7 years, and starting from there and building from there. Because if, like I said earlier, if one book takes 6 months to make, and it's unreasonable to expect a person to work on 3 books a year, so that means you're only working on 1 to 2 books every year, because sometimes a book will cross over into the next. So you have to be realistic about, maybe in 7 years you'll work on 10 to 12 books, but that, it literally was your heart and soul. So if you have time and you're patient, this is definitely a really great path to pursue and to give your attention to. And the beauty of it all, I would say, is the power to realize and look back and say, wow, you're genuinely a part of history now, because this, it's not just a book of pictures. Like, this is, you made something, and all art is a process of creation. So, it's a really beautiful, it's a beautiful field to be into. And I'm glad that I could share this. But I know there's honestly a lot more questions that I have to answer. But I wanted to really sit down with you guys today and answer the ones that I seen in the post, because that took first priority. I'm going to make another one right before I go live every time, so that you all have a place to essentially congregate and let me know what you want to hear or what you need feedback on. But I want to be more present, and if you have suggestions on how I can do that, definitely please let me know, because it's really challenging navigating so many pieces of social media and not really knowing how to, like, there's the wall, the wall of, like, oh yeah, I made a piece of content, then you comment, and then it kind of ends there. But I know there's more that can be said. So if there's any other suggestions into how to mend that gap, and so that you can get more information from me, I would love to know how to do that, because I have no idea how that works, and I'm learning, but I'm more than willing to learn. A Discord group or a group chat, that'd be really cool. I would not be against that. I've heard about Discord, and if I could learn about that, I will. If we get enough people who are interested, I will genuinely look into it. So I'm gonna write it down right now, because I've heard about it, but I was like, would people be interested in that for me? Because I feel like I have no sense of who has a need for it. So, but I will write it down. I've noted it. I have at least one person, so that's great. So if there's any other questions, we're rolling up to about 53 minutes now. So it's been almost an hour that we've been hanging out. So if you have any questions, you can let me know now. Otherwise, like, I guess I'll see you next week. So I'll just wait a couple minutes and see. So I guess I'll mention, like, in my life now, what's happening. I'm actually in, like, a little bit of a quiet period between 2 projects. So what's nice is that I have a break, and I've submitted all my work, so I'm waiting to get feedback. It can be up to 1 to 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks before I hear anything. So I want a little bit of a break. So this is great that I can be able to share. You're very welcome. You're very, very welcome. I hope you have a great day. Yep. Let me make sure I got everything. Live chat. Yeah, I think I got everything. Yeah, this is awesome. That's great. So if you do have any more questions, you can leave them under this video or under the following community post that I'm going to leave. If there's any other types of videos that you'd like me to come out with that is not a live video, I would highly suggest that you let me know as well. Because this year you'll be seeing a lot more of me. I'm saying that now because I'm putting it out there. So I want to help you guys any way that I can. And if it's not helping, I do want to just encourage you to do whatever it is that you're dreaming of doing, because this life is not meant to be done alone. So thank you. Thank you. I will see you guys next time. Bye.